Hello and welcome back to the Page Break podcast. I'm Richard Robertson. My co-host Brian is not here because he sold his house and he has to move out today by 6. And so he's in, I think he didn't understand how much stuff you accumulate living in the same house for 30 years. So he's in full on panic mode right now while we're just sitting here relaxing, the three of us, and recording a podcast. So we've got two of Genesis authors who are some of our multi-book authors, Judith Rost and Magdalen Dugan. We're so excited to have them on. I think there's going to be some really cool faith-based stuff that we'll talk about, but even more than that, like if you really want to know how to fix a car, you ask a mechanic. If you want to know how to write a book, these are probably two of the ladies that you want to talk to. And so I'm just pumped to have them on. So we're just going to dive right into it because we have a limited amount of time, and I want to make sure and get all of our questions answered. Magdalen, I'm going to start with you. Our writing or everything we publish at Genesis is somewhat faith-based. It doesn't have to be a 31-day devotional. It can be a faith-based fiction story, but most of our authors say they feel called to write. Is that kind of how you view this? And tell us a little bit about your calling.
Definitely, I have always felt called to write. I started writing when I was a really little girl. And one of the reasons was that I was not a very well child. I spent a lot of time sick in bed and reading stories. And also, I had a pretty dysfunctional family. And so reading literature, really good literature, gave me a window into the world, into the rest of the world, a better world. And it also taught me in a very beautiful way about how God works in people's lives. Most classical literature will show the workings of providence in people's lives. It doesn't have to be a direct, any kind of preaching, because it's just reality. If people are trying to tell the truth about human experience, then they will be talking about providence in the lives of human beings. So as I saw that happening, well, I wanted to write about it too, and I wanted to share what I had learned, and I wanted to tell the truth too, and maybe help somebody else who was struggling. And I've always felt that way. My models have been people like Dostoevsky or Zygmunt Unset, who have been focusing on the journey of a soul.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And so one of the things as a pastor and an evangelist, I've been two of those things in my life. When we're talking about being called, it was how do you sense that or how do you feel that? I remember when I first felt like I was called to preach, I was 16 years old. I didn't want to preach. I wanted to either be Michael Jordan or Jose Canseco. And so I put in an audio tape and it happened to be a preacher. And then I was really kind of wrestling with God on this. And the preacher said, I knew if it just started it in the middle of the sermon, I guess. And it said, I knew if I didn't preach, I would just die. And I just hit stop on the tape player and just kind of like hung my head. And I was like, okay, God, I get it. I understand. But everybody senses that calling in a different way. Judith, when you felt called to write your books, how did you sense that? Like, how did you feel that?
Well, I guess I started late in life. Even in school, I was always writing. I think I wrote my very first short story when one of my English teachers in 8th grade got engaged to be married. So as a wedding gift to them, I wrote them a love story and I gave it to them. Off and on throughout my married life, but I would sit and write. And I tried being a full-time writer for a while, but at that time I just had a manual typewriter. So, I just didn't have take the time and have the time to write. But as I got older and retired, I became a grant writer. And then when I definitely retired, my husband said, well, why don't you finish that book that you started? It took me 9 years to finish my first book, but I was 68 years old when I published my first book. But I just felt that God wanted me to write these books, and he wanted me to make sure that he was in the books, but I also wanted to write to entertain people. So that's what I basically do with my books. I write for entertainment, but then I throw in inspiration along the way and bring God into my books and miracles. And I think Jesus defines me. I don't like to be too preachy when I write. So just enough of the God things to inspire people, I've gotten nice emails from some of my readers saying how inspired they were by my books. So that makes me happy if I can inspire someone and help them to, get through life and be entertained at the same time. I mean, that's my goal.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so I was raised in a half Christian, half infidel household as a kid. My dad was a little rough around the edges, and I think my mom was about as perfect as you can get. I have no idea how the two of them got married, but I went to church every Sunday morning, but then I got to stay home with my dad on Sunday nights. So I kind of had this war and conflict inside of me, but I learned a love for fiction when I was young, and Chronicles of Narnia, while it wasn't necessarily just a very preachy book, there were all of these things that I could kind of connect back to stuff I'd heard the preacher say. And so some of those fiction things, even in Lord of the Rings, there was enough spiritual truth kind of embedded in there. That
Oh,
that I
yeah.
definitely understand what you're saying, that if you can be spiritual without being preachy, some people will attach to that. So, Magdalen, do you have any really cool stories or moments in your life where you experienced or felt especially guided by your faith when you were writing? Any kind of aha moments?
Well, I have experienced something amazing in writing the fourth book of my quadrilogy, which is right now in publication with Genesis.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It should be out in a couple of weeks, I think. So, throughout the four books of this series, I have been chronicling the life of a woman who was searching to find an authentic way to live and making a lot of mistakes and falling down and getting back up again, wandering into a cult in the second book of the series, and asking the question, how can I remember who I am? And in the third book, also, all of these are published by Genesis, by the way. And in the third book, she discovers her Christian path, and then she learns that her salvation is through the cross. And so there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of suffering. And so telling the truth about that has been challenging and inspiring for me because it has moved me to look at the difficulties in my own life as gifts from God and to know that nothing happens outside of his will, that all of the events of my life he's arranging for me so that I can be saved. And so in this fourth book, this is her, I don't want to give much away, but her dealing with her very, very difficult and heavy cross and seeing it through to the end of her life. And so after writing this series for almost 20 years, writing her death was very profound for me because it
I can
brought
imagine.
me face to face. Yeah, I mean, it's not autobiographical, but of course it's informed by a lot of my own experience. I think all of our writing is informed by our own experience. And so I had to face, what does it mean for me to face my own death? And what kinds of things should I be looking at? Should I be thinking about? Where do I want to be as I'm preparing for the end? So that's been incredibly profound for me. And it's just happened in the last 2 months. So very fresh in my mind.
Yeah, I can imagine. And by the way, as the fourth book is getting ready to be released, one of the things that I want readers to think about when when they pick these up on Amazon, I think the covers are just unbelievable. I mean, I'm so excited for the final book to come out. I think the covers just turned out magnificent. The books are really good. I think people are really going to like them.
Genesis has got
Okay.
an amazing design team. Amazing, because I would give sketches and ideas and they would come up with just great covers.
Yeah, they turned out really good. Albert did a shout out to John Albert. He did a great job. So, okay, so let's get into some nuts and bolts now a little bit more because faith-based stuff is what we do here. So most of our authors are going to have similar stories to tell as far as the big why behind why they write, but all of them have a little bit different process. For instance, I used to write articles for theological journals, and if I was going to do that, my process was always the same. Outline first, fill in the outline, let my editor look at it, get it back, and it looked like it was bleeding with just red marks all over the paper. Then rewrite, but the outline always, my big, thing for me was the outline always stays the same. And so but that was part of my process. So, Judith, do you have anything in specific as far as kind of tips and tricks, hints you might give? What's your overall process look like when you sit down to write a new book? Judith, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the overall process look like when you start to write a new book? When you go with what are your tips and tricks? How would you advise a young author to take on this kind of daunting challenge, really?
Well, first I have to figure out, what the book is going to be about. And what I like to do is to start the first page and get attention getter on the first page. And then I kind of go from there. I sit down and I write out all my characters that I want to use. And I just kind of do like a brief summary of how I want the outcome to be. And a lot of times when I'm writing, I never know who the murderer is going to be in any of my murder mysteries till the very end. I just keep writing, and as I'm writing, I just put more clues in the way and just try and keep people guessing. Because, when you write a mystery or a murder mystery, you certainly don't want to give away, who the murderer is right away, but not until the end. So a lot of times I don't even know myself who the murderer is going to be or who's going to be involved till the very end. But it's a fun process, and romance is a little bit different because you'd know who they're going to end up with. But a lot of times my characters are always struggling one way or another. It's usually with their faith. At least one of the characters is struggling. And then some of the main characters are the inspiration that another character needs. And I did my 4-book series, the River Falls Mystery Series, and used the same characters throughout the 4 books. And in each book, each character that I use is developed more and more into their own person. And it just at the end of the series, it just everything seems to come together. It was fun writing a series, and I enjoyed that, but I don't have any set time or anything that I sit down to write. I find that my best time to write is late at night. I'm a late
Okay.
night person, and I like the quiet. And so a lot of times I won't sit down till like 9, 10 o'clock to write. And then I'll write till maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll go to bed.
Wow, that's interesting. I am a early morning writer. So you said several things that I want to address because I think there's some cool stuff in there. The fact that you solve the mystery
Mhm.
in about the same place that the reader is going to solve the mystery is really cool. That's not something that I've heard people say a lot, so I love that. My wife and I are very competitive people. My wife is not competitive outwardly. If you were playing a game with her, you would not know she was competitive. If she lost, the car ride home is where I would find out all of the things she wanted to say out loud when she was playing the game. So we have this little competition that we do that every movie, show, book, we try to figure out who did it first. And we're very demonstrative about it. And I'm usually right about 75% of the time. She is not within earshot, so I can say that right now. But trying to figure out who done it is a big part of my entertainment experience. So I love the fact that you're not dropping like there are some movies or shows that I've seen and I know who the murderer is within 5 minutes. I don't enjoy it anymore because I already figured it out. So that's why Murder on the Orient Express is one of my favorite things in the history because like the first time you read it, you're like, how can any of this be real? And at the end, you're like, they all did it. Like it was just such a great, great book. So yeah, I love that. And then so let's go back to the same characters throughout. So Judith has a character in one of her or in all of her books who has caused me the greatest amount of grief of any character in any book in history. And it's a character whose name is Azalea. And we do audiobooks here. Judith and Magdalen both are using us for audiobooks. They have both been through the mill with our audiobook program because we contracted a third-party company to do them, and it was just, unfortunately, I'd like to say Genesis is perfect all the time, but unfortunately, we lost our shirts on that deal. So we hired people and brought them in-house. Magdalen doesn't know this yet, but her books are done. I actually listened to them today.
Wonderful. Well,
Yeah,
you
and
made my day, my week.
they sound awesome. I'm really excited about it.
Wow, wow, wow.
But the people we hired to do these books are awesome. But there is azalea must be the hardest word in the history of human experience to get a really advanced AI technology to say. And so we had people in tears as they worked on it for weeks. We got it right, but we also found another cool way for Judith to do her books, and we're doing that way now. But I can attest to the fact that, yeah, that word, that lady's name, Azalea, is in those books like 1,000 times because you have to change each one of them. And so, but yes, I love the idea of keeping that whodunit secret to the end. I think that's some really good advice. And writing late. Like, for instance, my kids are very different. I've got 2 kids that are early risers and 2 kids that'll work till 2 o'clock in the morning. So I know people function differently in that way.
It's the peace and quiet, I guess, that I like. I don't have to worry about phone calls late at night, and if I start writing in the morning, I get phone calls.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can
And
totally
I
understand
also
that.
have 2 dogs that need taking care of in the morning. So mornings are not good for me.
Yeah, totally understand. Magdalen, do you have any routines, habits? You've just like Judith, you've written several. Anything that like has stayed consistent throughout all the books as far as your habits?
Oh my. Well, you know, I'm almost 73 and I started publishing when I was in my 20s. So, no, there's nothing that's stayed consistent because my life has changed so much. So, I will have to say that uh, for about 25, 30 years there, where I was working full time and also tutoring at night. I'm a professor of English and I actually teach writing on the college level. And I was very, very busy. So for that whole period of time, I would write only on Sunday afternoons after church, and I'd have a 4 to 5 hour block of time, and no one was going to take that away from me. So I'd sit down about 2:30 in the afternoon, and sometimes I'd even work past when I told myself I was going to stop. Yes, like you, Judith, I do like to have an outline, but I don't stick to it very well because I am also discovering as I write what my characters are going to do. And I am getting to know them as people. And so often I'll start out with an idea of where I'm going and write into it. I think as a teacher of writing, it's very important for me to free write. Super, super important. One of the worst enemies of a writer is his or her own judgment, self judgment. And so I always talk about the fact that we have a right brain and a left brain. And our right brain is the creator and our left brain is the critic. So we need both of them as writers for sure, but we can't have them working at the same time. So if we can create first and then let our creation sit for a little while and come back to it, then we have some objective critical abilities to improve it. Whereas if we write a couple sentences and cross them out or erase them or in the old days, rip the paper out of the typewriter and throw it in the wastebasket. We're just, we're defeating ourselves. So the way for me to work with people to get over their writer's block is to tell them free write, free write, free write. I will not read it. I will only have you submit to me a chunk of stuff. And if you've done it, then I'll give it back to you. Then you edit it. So that's how I work with myself too. I kind of treat myself as if I'm my own student and discipline myself in that way. I won't let myself edit until I've already made something. And that doesn't mean the whole book. It could be a chapter, it could be a scene, and then I'll put it aside for a while and I'll come back to it. But when I complete a novel, however, I will put the whole novel aside for at least a month because then I'll come back to it with fresh eyes and I'll be reading it as if it's somebody else's work. And sometimes I like it. And sometimes I don't. And when I don't, I usually have an awful lot of work to do. So in my second book in my quadrilogy about the woman in the cult, my first complete draft of my novel, I had to chuck it because both my son, who is my wonderful critic, and I decided that it was too subjective. And so I had to, instead of having it told in the first person, I went back and told it in third person close with 12 different characters. So it would alternate from chapter to chapter, who was talking and who was understanding what was going on, so that people would get the idea of what was happening inside of this organization, and see the sincerity of these terribly mistaken people and not just think they were monsters.
Awesome.
Anyway,
Well, I'd like to. So maybe sometime in the future we can dive more into the cult side of that. So my background when I did some college level teaching was apologetics and polemics, and so cult related discussions have always been a big. I've been a big fan of those. So maybe we can jump back into that in a future podcast sometime.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, she mentioned something there about structure versus inspiration. Judith, when you're writing, do you ever, and because I didn't write fiction, this is not something I've had to deal with a whole lot, but do you ever come up against like, okay, this is how you should write it, from a technical standpoint, but this is also, I feel like doing something different. And so I'm going to write how I feel versus how I, know that the Chicago Manual of Style tells me to do this. Do you ever struggle with structure versus inspiration?
I follow what Magdalen says. I write and I just write and write and write. And then I go back and I look at it again and I maybe make some corrections and then I just keep going on from there. I mean, I just, you can't just keep going back over the same chapter over and over and over again, trying to perfect it. The idea is to get the story on paper or in the computer, I guess I should say, and just keep writing and just let it flow. You can always go back in and make changes. That's a wonderful thing about computers now is that it's so easy to go in and make changes. But most of my stories that I write, like my series, my 4-book series, most of those are based on actual happenings. Only I just embellished on them a lot. The one book, Saved by Grace, where 2 young girls are kidnapped, that actually happened. And it
Mm.
happened in my hometown back in Minnesota. And so I just kind of embellished on that and just put it in with my characters from the series and had it happen to them. And my very first book, some of the things in there are very true. There is actually a building in, I call my town, the River Falls Mystery Series. And the name of the town is River Falls, but there is actually an apartment there with 13 floors and apartment 1313. So that creates, the demon theory why construction workers won't go into apartments or buildings with 13 floors because of bad luck. And so this just kind of reiterates that theory. And then my second book is full of miracles, and those things actually happened. And so, it just goes on from there. It's stories that I know, real stories that actually happened to people, but I just kind of turned them into my own characters and embellished on them. So I guess that's what they say you write what you know, and that's what
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice, writing what you know. So we've just got a few minutes left, so I want to get to this third section here, and we're going to talk a little bit about your books. So, Magdalen, you've got Breathing Homeless, The Way, and then The
And the,
Cross,
the cross.
which will be released, I think, probably next week. It should finish.
Very exciting. Very exciting. Yeah, I'd like to mention each of those novels has a subtitle. And of course, even though I'm an egotistical person, I'm certainly not going to write novels called The Way, the Truth, and the Life. But the subtitle to Breathing is the Breathing the Way.
Yep.
Homeless, the truth, because of these poor, confused people, and the way, the life, because it is the life that she finds. And then it's the cross, the resurrection. So I'm not going to end this poor person's life with the cross, because there's something that comes after the cross, and it's what we all build our hope on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. I also have a book based on real life experience, just like you were talking about, Judith. I was very inspired by the life of the animalist painter Matilda Lotz, and so I researched her life. I spent a lot of time at the Lotz House Museum, talked with the curator, looked at all her old photographs, her dolls, all of the Civil War memorabilia there, and that's a very thoroughly researched historical novel, which is a standalone novel. And then I also have a number of books of poetry, because I started out my writing life writing poetry, and I've written, magazine articles and so forth, travel journals, things like that.
Well, I'm excited about the one coming out, and then we actually have another one that should be in production soon, within days, I think.
Yes, and I'm very excited if I can pitch that, because this is a collection. There are 3 collections. So it's going to be a slim volume, which I think will be a good Christmas gift. It'll be under 100 pages long. Also, we'll have a beautiful cover design a la the production team of Genesis, and it will contain 12 poems of Christmas, a collection of poems on the great feasts of the life of the Lord, such as the Ascension, his baptism, and so forth. And it also contains a distillation of the gospel commands. This is something I've been working on this year in my own journaling. I do a lot of journaling. I read scripture every morning for at least an hour, sometimes longer. And so I've been writing down, what did he tell us to do? If you love me, keep my commandments. So what are they all? Not only the 10, not only the 2 great commandments, but all of his implied directions to us. And so there's about 50 pages of that.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And
Well,
that will be my new book.
we're looking forward to starting that one. And Judith, you've got 2 basic series, the River Falls Mystery Series and then the Texas Hill Country Series, but you also have a Christmas book in that one, Christmas in Fredericksburg, which is that's more of a romance book, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
But the mystery series, so that's got 4 books in it: Secrets in the High Rise, No Reasonable Doubt, Saved by Grace, Too Close for Comfort, and then in Texas Hill Country, you just have 2 in that one, right? Or is there a third one?
I'm in the process of writing a third one right now, but I've kind of set that aside for now so I can do the audio for my River Falls Mystery Series. So right now I'm trying to do the audio for that. So
Yeah, and
all
it's
those
going
books
really
will be
well.
in my own voice.
Yeah, I actually listened to about 3 or 4 chapters of that today. It's really well. I've actually already got it to my editor, so he's working. By the time you get to the end of the first book, he'll have the first half already edited. So it's going super well. I think that the mystery books, obviously, romance is. Do I look like a guy who just is interested in romance books? Is not probably my number one genre, but mystery is probably my favorite. So, and I'm very, very well acquainted with these because I've been helping the guys with the audio. So exciting books. Again, all of them be great Christmas presents from both authors. This has been a blast having you both on. We're a little bit over on time, but honestly, we probably could have gone for an hour podcast instead of a half hour. But I thanks for both of you being here. And yeah, we're looking forward to all the stuff coming out in the next few days, months, and weeks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
Good to meet you, Judith.
It's been a pleasure to meet you, Magdalen and Rich. I get to see your face.
Yeah, I don't know that part's a pleasure, but we'll all talk soon.
Well, you
Take care,
always
lady.
wonder what somebody looks like.
Yeah, well, now you know I'm a kind of a Oklahoma version of Santa Claus. All right, take care, ladies. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.